All right, we're live. Hello and welcome to another webinar, proudly brought to you by itCraft, Europe's leading IT consultant in mobile and web-based app development. I can see we're joined by people from all around the world. We're a global event today, Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia, UK, Europe, and a few people from the US who are either having a really late night or an extremely early morning. Welcome to you. Welcome to everyone around the world. Obviously, it's a really relevant topic, a hot topic, and to be joined by two extremely intelligent guests and experts in their relative fields, whether you're watching live or somewhere in the future, we know that whatever content comes out of this today and the insights from two industry leaders, it's going to be fantastic. So welcome to you all. Today, as I mentioned, we have the privilege of being joined by Bartosz Pieslak from Warsaw in Poland. He's the co-founder of itCraft, leading consultant and expert for telemed projects all over the world. Welcome to you, Bartosz. Hello, I'm really excited to be here today. And on the other side of the world and upside down, from Adelaide, Australia, an entrepreneur, internationally renowned expert in AI and cognitive science and co-founder of Presagen, Dr. Don Perugini. Hello and welcome to you.
Hi all, and thanks for joining and thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So, look, today, the topic of today's discussion is the future of eHealth and your guide to Medtech development. And I guess specifically we want to look today at the development of software and applications in the Medtech sector. And we're going to look at, we're going to talk to Bartosz about some key players in telemedicine, look at some different system types and business models, and then I'd like to talk to Don about AI being used in eHealth, and then we'll have a look at some compliance issues in terms of HIPAA and GDPR, and of course the insights from our experts today on the future of eHealth. So as usual, for those who normally join us on our webinars, you can leave us a question. We have a few polls. Can we see those? If people want to jot in some answers there.
Yeah, I already see some answers. It's working.
Okay, so do you currently have a telehealth solution? So if you already have one or you use one, you can say yes or no, or you can tell us you're just interested in Medtech. And the other question, which is interesting, is how many people were using telehealth solutions in 2019? Obviously, 2020 is a different kettle of fish, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the moment. See some answers there. Thank you very much. And something else that we'll probably find out later, or shortly actually, is what percentage of clients are satisfied with care provided using telemedicine, which is really interesting because it's relatively new in terms of patient use and being the norm. But let's continue on. I wanted to begin just this morning, before we go to our experts, I'd like to just begin by clarifying some of the terminology. I think it would be really important. Already in the title of the webinar, we've mentioned the words eHealth and Medtech, and throughout the webinar today, you'll hear telemedicine, telehealth, and many other words to describe technology in the medical sphere. I guess In the industry, a lot of these words are just used interchangeably, and as a general rule, it's okay and widely acceptable. But if we have a look at the actual definitions, it might give us a little bit of clarity to begin with. So Medtech, we might have heard the term fintech. So a financial banking application would be under fintech. Anything under medtech is actually the use of technology in caregiving for patients and the medical sector. eHealth is the healthcare services provided electronically via the internet, and the term eHealth, I guess, refers to the use of IT to increase the efficiency as a whole of the medical industry. And I think it covers things like the use of electronic health records, electronic prescriptions, the use of AI in diagnoses, and we'll talk a lot about this shortly with Dr. Perugini. But whatever terms we use, we can be sure that the technology is going to continue to be taken advantage of and adopted by medical clinics, hospitals, and caregivers as a whole. So we have the words telemedicine, the remote diagnosis and treatment of patients via telecommunications. So even I know in Poland actually medical clinics have locked the doors, and if you want to go see the doctor first, there's a teleconsult. And for those who don't have software to do these consultations, the telephone is being used, and this has been used for decades now in terms of dealing with remote patients. And telehealth, it includes telemedicine, but it also includes all the other non-clinical services like provider training and conducting meetings and medical training. So actually we live 2020. I don't know. It's been an interesting year. We've spent the majority of this year dealing with a global pandemic, and dealing with it's affected our daily lives. It's in our news feeds. We're bombarded with it in our inboxes. We've had to adapt in the way we do business, and even the way we buy food. We've been forced to leverage as much technology as possible to help in dealing with this pandemic. But I believe that the resulting demand for telehealth solutions to be developed and adopted by clinics, hospitals, caregivers, and even the patients themselves has increased exponentially, and we can see that in some of the statistics here. So there's been an 800% increase in the use of telemedicine services since the outbreak of COVID-19, and they believe by the end of 2020 we will have had over 1 billion telemedicine sessions. Last year the global medicine market was $41 billion and very much a growing industry. But the experts suggest and forecast that by the end of 2026, that the market size will be $155 billion, which is, this pandemic has been a shot in the arm, just no pun intended, but it's been a shot in the arm to the industry and those people creating solutions and looking to really make the processes more efficient. And probably our grandchildren, they will laugh at us that we lined up at a doctor's clinic for time and went to a building to have a consult. So we can see some change in the market, and even 60% of patients that have used telemedicine, they're satisfied with the level of care. So this is very interesting also. And from the doctor's perspective and the medical side, 75% of doctor and urgent care ER visits could actually be efficiently and safely handled using telemedicine. So we can see that this industry it's not a flash in the pan. This is something that is going to change the way that we deal with the medical industry going forward, and technology is the driver behind this, and that's why I want to bring in Bartosz Pieslak now. Bartosz, if we think of car riding application. Everyone thinks of Uber. What kind of companies are leading the way in terms of telemedicine these days?
Sure, Gareth. When I think about the key players in telemedicine, the first few that come to mind are actually Hill and Babylon. And interestingly, they have many common points, although development of these companies have taken them into slightly different direction. The first is Cree system, which was built in Sweden. Cree is a telemedicine platform actually that acts as an extension to public healthcare service. It is available in 5 different countries, but only in Nordics they have over 500,000 patients, which is, I believe, huge, and the idea to extend the public healthcare services is just brilliant. Now going to United States, we have Hill. Hill started out as a home visits booking platform, but recently they've expanded their services to include teleconsultation. In Hill's philosophy, they say that the primary care should begin with doctors face-to-face home visit, but later can be moved into teleconsultation, especially for chronic diseases management and things like that. And finally, we have United Kingdom with Babylon. And Babylon was created as a teleconsultation platform in the beginning, but over time they pivoted their business to focus mainly on AI development. So they help patients diagnose themselves using artificial intelligence. So this is so-called symptom checker solution. And finally, we have investments. As you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, each of them is heavily invested. And by heavily, I mean hundreds of millions of US dollars.
Wow. So actually we deal with some startups, yes, and they get seed funding of $100,000, $200,000, $300,000. So to see the size of investment for a product that works, it's remarkable. There's $500 million there for Babylon. Okay. I mentioned before, eHealth covers a lot of aspects of technology in medicine. Can you give our viewers some ideas as to what kind of tech is used in telemedicine?
Sure, Gareth. I've started this presentation talking a bit about software, so now I would like to show you some combination of software and hardware. And we have kiosks. Kiosks are standalone booths that include video conference equipment. So one can ask, why should I use kiosk if I have mobile apps and or the apps I've mentioned in the very beginning? So basically, kiosks are equipped with some expensive sensors, devices, which you as a patient don't have to own to be examined remotely by a doctor. So using kiosk, you can check your body composition, blood oxygen, sugar, ECG, and many other like parameters. I believe that most probably some of you already had a chance to see those kiosks in shopping malls or maybe at schools. So now I would like to mention another hardware, piece of hardware that is wearables and home monitoring equipment. As some time ago, wearables were treated more as a gadgets without a great value in medical diagnosis, but currently we have a whole set of different medically certified devices that can perform heart tests like ECG, detect falls, monitor your temperature, allow two-way communication between patient and a doctor. They can track position using GPS. Let's consider here patients with dementia, for example. Basically, you can think of 2 types of wearables and home monitoring devices. One group is using your smartphone as a hub to transfer data, to show you some results. And in second group, you can find standalone sets that communicates directly with remote care center. This is pretty good solution for those who are not tech savvy or often dependent elderly people. So, and now I would like to move back to software again, as when mentioning Cree, Hill, Babylon earlier, I already covered 3 types of mobile apps, that is teleconsultation, visit booking, and symptom checking. But there are more types worth mentioning, like apps that help you lead a healthy lifestyle. You have reminder apps, for example, reminding to take medicine, mental health apps that track your mood, tracking apps, for example, tracking key life parameters, or even health monitoring apps which can communicate with external devices.
Okay, nice. I've got a question here: how to establish the right business model? Now, most people, they get into medicine because they want to help people, and I know a lot of selfless people working in the medical industry, and probably a good time to shout out to all those people who are helping in the current pandemic. And wear a mask, you people out there, to help our medical professionals. But they're selfless, they want to help people, and a lot of these ideas come because they're trying to make a more efficient solution. But ultimately, healthcare is a business, isn't it? And every business needs cash flow and a good business model. So I want to ask you about business models, but I've got a statement from our very own Bartosz Pieslak. In itCraft, we start every process with a workshop, yes, and we want to understand the business side of the software before we start designing anything. And I've heard you say this many times, Bartosz: correctly identifying the payer in a business model is essential. Can you give our viewers a little bit of an insight into this, especially in the Medtech sector?
Sure, Gareth. Something that seems simple in theory is often verified just after implementation. Therefore, in this part, I brought 2 real-life examples of evolution of telemedicine systems in search of ideal business models. Starting with Homedoctor. Homedoctor is a company which uses mobile and web technology to arrange home visits by doctors to patients in so-called Uber model. Homedoctor started working by addressing the service directly to customers who paid for the visits out of their own pocket. In Poland, in country which they started to operate, there are 2 basic models of care. We have public healthcare, which is free, and private healthcare, which is covered by private insurance. It turned out that in such market, acquiring a customer for Homedoctor services, it's not easy. In other words, we can say that customer acquisition cost is relatively high, as usually nobody wants to spend additional money. Remember, public healthcare we have for free, and private insurance we are already paying for. So let's see what happened with Homedoctor later on. I have a private insurance myself, so I can confirm that careful observation of the market made it possible actually to spot some problems in this private healthcare, the area which was not addressed by Homedoctor so far. What I mean here is that patients with private insurance have to wait many hours for doctor's arrival. On the other hand, insurers had poorly structured processes cooperating with too many individual doctors, so where they were not able to efficiently plan or assign visits to them. They had particular problems, of course, in autumn and in spring seasons when we have a peak of the disease. And here Homedoctor came with a brilliant proposal, giving a good appointment planning system to and of course doctors who were ready to see the patient in 60 minutes of reporting the need. This way, Homedoctor gained access to many patients. They simplified their billing system. I mean, having one big company as a payer instead of many, many individual patients. B2B model is much better choice for Homedoctor, as I believe they are really solving the problem of patients and insurers at the same time. So this is the story behind Homedoctor, and now I would like to take a look on second example I've prepared for today. Here you can see business to family. And actually, to easily understand the business to family concept, it's worth mentioning or introducing the history of Sidelica company. The CEO of Sidelica had a real family problem. She couldn't visit her grandmother and look after her as often as she would like. That is why she came up with the idea to create a wristband that would monitor her grandmother's health. And bearing in mind that we have many such families out there, addressing these wristbands to families was a natural first step in Sidelica's business model. The model worked, I can say it worked, and it works until today actually, but it turned out that there is a way to sell faster and to sell these devices in bulk. So we have B2G, which stands for business to government. Switching to B2G model gave them access to sell their devices and services in sets. Yeah, we can see it here, of 100 to 500 devices at once. Hospitals and nursing homes that are financed from public funds have become clients of Sidelica service. And when thinking about B2G model, most often you decrease the profit margin, but you super quickly build the scale and implement projects that are secured for in terms of finances, for example, for 1, 3, or even 3 years ahead, which is perfect for actually any business. And I believe that with just these two examples of companies, I've managed to cover practical approach to business to customer, business to business, business to family, or business to family and friends, and business to government models.
Nice. Actually, we see here a real importance of, in the beginning, building something which is scalable and allowing the market to dictate how the product is used, and that's not only the case here in telemed, but in all business models also. So, actually, it'd be a good time to bring in Don at this stage. I'd love to talk to you, Don, about AI in healthcare, specifically your flagship product of LifeWhisperer from Presagen, and maybe you could briefly touch on the evolution of LifeWhisperer. I'm not sure if you had to pivot, adapt, evolve from the original concept, and what kind of business model have you, in terms of from the original concept and what you wanted to do, how have you adapted and evolved?
I guess it's not really a pivot, but I guess we started with the concept of LifeWhisperer to use AI for IVF, looking at images of embryos. And then I guess what happened is we kind of met, and I'll talk about this in the presentation, we had all these challenges along the way. And as we started to solve these really big challenges, that's how the platform, this Presagen platform kind of evolved and developed, that we thought, well, we can actually replicate, the building of LifeWhisperer, we can actually build other healthcare products in addition to that. So rather than a pivot, it was more kind of an evolution that in solving one problem, we actually ended up developing a platform which can build a whole range of other healthcare products in addition to that. So, and in terms of the business model, we've tried, a few options. So, it's our customers are the clinics but ultimately it's the patients that pay. So it's just trying to get the right balance. How do you reduce the barriers for clinics and get the patients to pay for it? So I'll talk a little bit about that in the presentation as well. How we deal with that payment.
So ultimately, you go from business to business and then to customer, yeah, through the
B2B2C. So
okay, it's really smart. Well, maybe it's a great time actually to talk a little bit about AI in healthcare. So our viewers would love to know what's been happening at Presagen and the launch of your product LifeWhisperer. So congratulations, by the way, of being able to roll out to multiple continents and the hard work from your team. We've been following your efforts since we met in Las Vegas at the health event, and congratulations to you and your team and to Dr. Michelle as well.
Thank you. So, okay, so what I want to talk about today is artificial intelligence in healthcare more generally, and also a particular case study. And I mentioned that we had this idea of developing this product for fertility, and what that kind of led to is a development of this platform. So what I want to do, just briefly, kind of a bit of introduction about myself, how I went from research to entrepreneurship. So I spent the first 10 years of my career as a defence scientist. So I had a PhD in AI, got to work on some great international defence projects. In 2007, decided to take the leap and start my first business, IC Analytics, and I did this with my partner, Michelle Perugini, who has a PhD in medicine. That business operated in different industry sectors. We operated out of Silicon Valley and Australia, eventually sold that to EY in 2015, hung around EY for a year, and then in 2017, we met up with our third co-founder, Jonathan Hall. He was on his second PhD, had this idea of using AI for IVF. Michelle and I loved it because she's in the medical space. I was in the AI space, so we got together and started the Presagen business. So what is Presagen? Well, Presagen is really a platform that allows us to build globally scalable healthcare products and to commercialize them. And we have a specific focus in women's health. And our first product is LifeWhisperer, which uses AI to improve IVF outcomes. And I'll talk about that a bit later. But what I want to do is kind of talk about the healthcare sector more generally. So what's happening is healthcare is becoming unsustainable, and the costs kind of blowing out in most countries. One of the main drivers for that is the population is actually getting older. Everyone's aging. The fertility rates are low. And what that means is the health needs are increasing and the workforce is shrinking to support an aging workforce. So there's a really massive opportunity there for technology to kind of come in and really support the healthcare system and make things affordable and make it more efficient. And when you look at the femtech sector more specifically, in women's health, we're focusing in, it's really largely underserved, services half the world's population. So there's a real need to ensure that there's technology that does service the women's health sector. So when you look at how do you bring technology to healthcare, there's two stakeholders. Firstly, there's the clinicians. So they're the primary caregivers. They're time poor. They have to make critical decisions. Sometimes because they're so overwhelmed and time poor, they really lack that inability to spend time with the patient rather than on the patient. And on the other side, you have the patients themselves. They're wanting better outcome. They want treatment transparency, and there's also opportunity to help them manage their own health. So technology here, there's a massive opportunity to kind of not only bridge the gap between clinicians and patients, but also with technology to even help patients manage their own health care and reduce that burden on the clinician. So when we look at AI in healthcare, there's a whole range of applications that AI is starting to, make some inroads. So one area in particular is massive at the moment is in pharmaceuticals, so drug discovery. There's a huge amount of money being poured into startups in that area. There's personalized medicine. Before we talked about Babylon, so you've got chatbots and personal assistants. The area we're working in is diagnostics. And really around decision support. So when we say diagnostics, we're not talking about AI to replace the clinicians. It's really about how do you support their decisions? How do you help them make the right decisions and the right diagnosis? So I mentioned before, we came across various challenges. So what we found is holding back AI in healthcare, there's three key issues. Firstly, clinical data is really hard to come by. It's held by these clinics, they're the custodians, they value that data, and it's really hard to be able to get that data. And when you do get that data, it's inherently poor quality. So when it comes to clinical data, there's clinical subjectivity, uncertainty, and inherently it's poor quality, and the AI needs good quality data in order to be an effective product. The second issue is that a lot of AI products out there really lack the commercial scalability and reliability. So when you do have a global product, you want to make sure that it works across all different types of patients, all different types of clinics around the world. And in order to do that, what is really critical is you need a globally diverse data set. You need a data set that represents different patient demographics and different clinical settings. And that's how you build a product that is scalable. But there's a challenge in that, which is the third point. If you want to collect a globally diverse data set, you can't bring it to a centralized location to train your AI like you normally would train AI in any other sector, because data privacy laws prevent that data moving outside of the country of origin. So then you've got this issue that you want a globally diverse data set to build a scalable AI product, and you need to be able to clean the data and work with the clinics. And so you've got this really complex environment that you need to work in order to build these AI products. So what we've done in this context is we built this global cloud platform, which we call Presagen AI Open projects. And it really allows us to collaborate with clinics globally and crowdsource that globally diverse data to build scalable AI products for clinics globally. So there's three simple steps. And clinics are kind of central to this whole process because they contribute the data and they're also the end users, which is great. So the first step is we partner with clinics. So if we're looking at a particular product we want to build, we have a call out, we invite clinics to contribute their data, and they can safely contribute their data using our clinical data portal, simple as drag and drop. We have a very specific format, and in return, or to incentivize clinics to contribute that data, we have a royalty-based model. So all the clinics that contribute the data and the clinical support to build the product, we give royalties when the product is released to market. Now, the second aspect is we train the AI on that global data set. So we have two unique technologies. The first one is a technology that can actually clean the data. Even data, it can identify errors in the data, even data that's difficult for expert clinicians to identify. We found a way to be able to remove those errors. And secondly, we've got what's called a federated learning training system. So what it does is the AI is able to train on data distributed all throughout the world without having to move or centralize that data. So we've got our own unique algorithm that does that. And once we train the AI, we can sell the AI back into the clinics using the same global cloud platform. So this is kind of what evolved over the years as we're trying to build LifeWhisperer and just overcoming those challenges with getting the data from the clinics by incentivizing them, cleaning the data using new technology, and then being able to train on this globally diverse data using federated learning. So the first product we built is called LifeWhisperer using the platform. And it basically uses AI to improve pregnancy outcomes in IVF. So if you look at the fertility sector more generally, globally infertility is increasing, and around 200 million couples worldwide struggle with fertility and they need IVF in order to conceive. Now, the IVF process is costly, it's traumatic, and the success rate is really low at around 20%. The IVF process, so you start with, the female egg, you fertilize it with sperm. After around 5 days, they become embryos, and you can have, say, 5 in a dish. At that stage, a clinician needs to decide, or embryologist needs to decide which embryo they need to transfer to the patient to see if she gets pregnant. Now, selecting a viable embryo is critical to a successful pregnancy outcome. So what they do now is they look down a microscope, they manually grade it using a particular scoring system, and they use that to rank the embryos and select one. There's also genetic screening, so they actually cut a piece of a healthy embryo and take it away for genetic testing. And that can be, quite costly, invasive, and it's not specifically to look at viability, it's really to look at, are there genetic abnormalities? But there is a relationship with getting a good embryo in that case. So what LifeWhisperer does is we use AI to help us, or help embryologists identify which embryos are going to lead, more likely to lead to a pregnancy. So we built this AI with and for clinics around the world. We use thousands of embryo images with known outcomes to train our AI. And what it does is the AI learns the morphological features that relate to a viable or a non-viable embryo, and even complex features that are really difficult for the human eye to see. So we've built this product. We now have approval to sell to 2/3 of the world market, including Europe, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Canada. We're currently going through the FDA process in the US. We're approved in some countries in Southeast Asia. So we've kind of demonstrated with all these users globally that we have built a highly scalable out-of-the-box product that can be relied upon. And importantly, it's actually camera agnostic, which is great. So here's a demo of LifeWhisperer. This is what the embryologists will see. So they'll take images of embryos, they'll drag and drop onto the web app, and the AI runs in the cloud, and then they return an instant AI assessment. And then from that, the clinician can see how viable that embryo is. And so that 72% there, for example, represents the score of that particular embryo. So they can implant the most viable one and then potentially freeze the remaining embryos for additional cycles. So we've tested LifeWhisperer, in an international clinical study. So we've shown our AI performs 25% better than, highly skilled human embryologists' manual visual assessment alone. So what that means, we can reduce the time to pregnancy, or the number of cycles patients need to have, by 15%. That saves the patient money, as well as having additional cycles, around $2,000, but it can also generate revenue for clinics, because a lot of clinics charge more for the first cycle than follow-on cycles. So we could potentially save clinics, or increase their revenue by $5,000 by getting them to see more first cycle high-value patients. We launched LifeWhisperer earlier this year, already making an impact on the IVF sector. We've already got, so this is a segment for what was on the news here in Australia, for the first patient in this clinic to get pregnant using AI. So we've got users in India, in Europe, and yeah, we're now expanding globally. So we talked about how do you what's the business model? We wanted to make sure LifeWhisperer was available for any patient anywhere at low cost. So our business model is pay per use. So we actually don't charge clinics any subscription costs. We don't charge them setup costs. So we can set up any clinic of any size anywhere within minutes, and they only pay for what they use. And basically, and then what they can do is they can pass that cost onto patients as part of their IVF treatment. And it's a low cost, given the high costs of IVF, they're mostly more than willing to pay for that small cost to improve their chances of success. So not only do we have quite a scalable model, but it's quite scalable in terms of the business model, reducing barriers for clinics to have access to it and to provide it to patients when they want to use it. And the way we structured it is so that it's really, it's not really the clinic paying for it. It's more about how do you get the patient to pay for it through the clinic. So I'll stop there.
Nice. Actually, it's as we can see from some of the comments, our viewers are very impressed, and we've got a number of questions which will some are related and some are not. So we'll get to those in a moment. But we've lost Dr. Don, have we? Can you hear us, Dr. Don?
I can hear you. I'm here.
Oh, good. The type of AI you use, I assume that's deep learning, yes?
Yes, that's right.
So deep learning is about pattern recognition. So are you able to tell us a little bit more about the AI algorithm, or without divulging?
We use a whole range of deep learning techniques. The real, I mentioned that it was camera agnostic. So we've actually shown it works on cameras that it wasn't even, we didn't even use any data for that camera to train. So there's really a whole range of processes. It's not about the deep learning algorithm at the end. There's a process for how you actually target the AI by understanding some of the medical aspects of the embryo and how you train the algorithm from that. So I'll give a very simple example. Before we start training the algorithm, and even the final model itself, we actually focus on specific segments within the image that we know are predictive of viability in pregnancy. So, for example, we look at the outer rim of the embryo, we look at the inner cell mass of the embryo in order to better target the AI so that it can produce a better outcome when it's actually used in practice. So so there's a whole range of ResNet, DenseNet. I know that's I'm not the one that does the technical coding and the like, but we use a whole range of techniques and bring all of those models together that produces that final AI product in the end.
Nice. And just one more question. We have a question from Suzanne, actually in the comments there. I'm wondering if the method's allowed in every country. In Germany, she thinks that method's not allowed because it might be seen as unethical. Have you come across any countries where you can't use this technology?
You can't do gender selection. That is seen as unethical. The clinics would already be doing this. IVF clinics will already be getting those embryos and ranking those embryos in order to assess which ones are viable that you should transplant. So it's just really adding an additional tool for the embryologist to make their decision. So I'm fairly it is approved in Europe, and there hasn't been any barriers in terms of ethics.
All right. Well, excellent insight, Don. Thank you for that. And actually, it brings us. You mentioned it, and it brings us to the point of data protection. You mentioned that this is really important, and I'll just get our screen back up and running. I wanted to bring in Bartosz again. One of the key points of discussion that comes up in any telemed project, no matter what happens, there's terminology called HIPAA and GDPR, and people want to talk about compliance in these eHealth projects. I guess really specifically from a developer's perspective, but any business perspective as well, Bartosz, how does HIPAA and GDPR compliance affect these types of projects?
Sure, guys. At the very beginning, let's look at HIPAA and GDPR in terms of business risks. It turns out that being not compliant does not pay off because penalties are up to $50,000 for record breach regarding HIPAA and up to 4% of organization turnover for GDPR breach. So the question is, who should be responsible for being compliant, and if there is an easy way actually to be sure that everything is just in order. And here comes the challenge, as it's up to developers and companies alike to ensure compliance requirements are implemented properly. So another question is, who must be HIPAA compliant? And to understand this topic better, let's have a look on PHI definition. And PHI stands for Protected Health Information. And protected health information is any information in a medical record that can be used to identify an individual and was created or used in order to provide healthcare service such as diagnosis or treatment. So this is theory. And I would like to check some practical examples to easily remember when an app is transmitting PHI. As you can see on this slide, whenever you think of scheduling appointments with your doctor, or receiving billing information from your doctor, or even sending a message to your doctor about medicine or prescription you need, you're using PHI. On the other hand, if you use some anonymous data regarding heart rate readings, number of steps, or calories burned, these are not treated as PHI, so you don't have to care about HIPAA compliance. So with this theoretical and practical examples, I believe that we are ready to move on to look at some technical safeguards that must be implemented to secure PHI, and most often this is just a developer's responsibility for these rules to be actually met. We have three groups that I would like to elaborate on today and give you some practical examples, as always, what they actually mean. And as I believe this topic is too broad for today's discussion, for today's webinar, I'm going to select 5 requirements and give some comments on this one to have better understanding of these technical requirements. So let's start with unique user identification. Unique user identifier allows to track users' activity in the system. The rule does not provide any single format for user identification, so it's up to you. It can be username, it can be randomly generated number. It's up to organization to decide what is best in particular case. But here you don't have to worry, it's nothing complicated. Emergency access procedure. These procedures are documented instructions how to obtain access to PHI record during an emergency situation. So companies must determine the types of situation that would require emergency access to data. As an example, I can give you instructions for offsite backups and recovery of protected health information, or actually the whole system you have, in case of failure of the main system. So the main server actually. Server goes down, we have a failure, nothing works. We have to understand what are the instructions to recover the server, the system on another server, and access the protected data. Next, we have authentication, and actually to prevent unauthorized access to PHI, I recommend that companies implement multi-factor authentication for users to gain access to the app. Multi-factor authentication requires users to enter multiple login credentials, like username and password, in combination with, for example, some biometrics, one-time PIN, or answering some security questions. And encryption and decryption is the fourth one selected for today. Still, in order to prevent unauthorized access to data stored on your system, you should implement an encryption. And let's imagine some examples here. Several HIPAA breaches every year happens because of the loss of theft of unencrypted device. Imagine a situation when your doctor's computer has been stolen. Because data on his computer is encrypted, the new owner of this computer will basically not be able to view any protected health information. And the last one for today is audit controls. And to ensure that PHI access is in accordance with HIPAA rules, you must track this access accordingly. And audit logs track users' access to PHI, what they access, what they do with the data, if they create it, read it, update, delete, how often they are using the data, for how long, when they had access to this data. Still, it's important to point out that security rules that does not identify the set of data that must be gathered in order to have audit controls done right. Again, this is companies' responsibility to consider possible risks and factors like infrastructure, like hardware, software you are using, security of these pieces of software, the architecture of the system, to determine appropriate audit controls. Yes, I hope that this quick review and examples made it easier for you to understand what is behind a technical HIPAA requirement and when you should trust your developer actually to help you meeting those requirements.
Absolutely a key question key point to discuss with any potential developer, yes. And Don, LifeWhisperer must be considered a software medical device. What can you tell us about compliance issues in terms of rolling out? Because HIPAA and GDPR are US and EU standards. When it comes to other countries, can you give us any other insight?
So basically we're HIPAA compliant and GDPR compliant. So our approach is look at all the compliance around the world, and it's not just computer security or data privacy, it's also quality management like ISO 13485. And our model is to try to follow the most stringent guidelines around the world to ensure that when we roll the product out, it is compliant anywhere that we go. So, so we look at both GDPR and HIPAA and just make sure that we're compliant across both and implement, as I said, the most stringent guidelines that's required for our software. But it's also important, for a startup company or any company, if you have a data breach, it could be catastrophic for that company. So we take data security really, really seriously, to the point, I talked about a global platform. We have servers around the world just to make sure data never leaves the country and always remains in the country, and just a whole range of layers of data security. Everyone's computer in our in our office is encrypted, and so it's very, very important to us to make sure we got the stringent security to keep private patient data protected.
And I guess it's probably no medical practitioner wants to put their name to something which is not HIPAA compliant. Yes, so it's key. It is key in the development of telemed projects. Maybe Bartosz, you can just summarize for us the differences between HIPAA and GDPR?
Sure. As I already discussed some HIPAA rules, rules that we should meet as a developer, and there are many similar rules regarding GDPR, but there are also some differences between HIPAA and GDPR. So first of all, you should think about being HIPAA compliant if you operate in North America, of course, and GDPR regarding European Union countries. We have some differences in PHI transfer. So in European Union, you always need a consent from the user if you want to transfer data to another entity. In states, sometimes the transmitting data without patient consent is if it's required, but by the treatment is just okay. Breach notification, you have to notify about any breach under HIPAA in 60 days, and regarding GDPR, you have only 72 hours to do that. And also in European Union, we have this right to be forgotten. So whenever a citizen demands to be forgotten, to delete all of this data, this should be met by the companies as well. And HIPAA doesn't grant this right actually to the patients.
Okay, excellent. Our time's just about up, and I'm going to invite Bartosz and Don to give us some last words on the future of eHealth and beyond 2020. But maybe just before we do that, we did get a couple of questions, and I don't know if we can answer all of them, but maybe just between the both of you, Bartosz and Don, if you could take maybe 20 or 30 seconds just to give us, our viewers, some answers in terms of one question. I was thinking about implementation AR, VR into Medtech solutions. What do you think? AR and VR in Medtech solutions. Does anyone have an opinion on that?
Last year, being in Las Vegas on this health conference, I've seen many startup companies that actually try to help you with your anxieties using VR. So if you are afraid of certain things, there are therapies when you use glasses and equipment like that, and you have special treatments actually to deal with your anxieties. This is the first example that comes to my mind, and there are a lot of companies of such a type these days.
Yeah, I've seen myself. What is it? And we're mentoring this company in France that was using virtual reality to help with chronic pain. So, to kind of distract them, and they found a way to just ease the pain for chronic pain sufferers, and it was quite effective.
Okay. Another question, which may have already been answered, but is it still worth getting into Medtech in 2020 and beyond? Or is it saturated? Is it a saturated niche? Or Don, Bartosz, would you recommend people jumping into another Medtech project?
Yeah, there's massive amount of opportunities. I think the key is finding there's just millions of problems. There's so many areas where technology can make a difference to clinicians, to patients, across that whole supply chain. So it's if you can find a niche specific application, then you can create really good business around it.
Yeah, I agree. Whenever you have insights in some areas, you can figure out how to build business based on your knowledge on the topic. So yeah, Medtech is rapidly growing, and there's still a space for creating new innovative companies.
Excellent. All right, we'll leave those questions there, but I'd love to finish with some final words about the future of eHealth, as is the title of today's webinar. So, Bartosz, would you like to start?
Sure. To summarize, I will use the opinion of CEOs with whom I interviewed while working on our ebook on telemedicine. As we all see, the progress is very rapid. We are using more and more mobile apps, more and more AI solutions, both as patients and as doctors. Many innovative eHealth solutions and companies are created actually every month. As a result, we can see that the market is very defragmented. Each area of health is addressed by different applications. So I believe that the biggest challenge for future will be to deliver a good user experience for the patient, because from patient's point of view, what we would like to use one provider of medical services, not thousands of them. So I believe that whoever intelligently integrates leading solutions providing best customer experience will be the winner in the eHealth race that we have today. Don, actually, what do you think about the future of eHealth?
So I think there's a massive future. Really, actually, I think it's been accelerated by COVID. So because of the COVID situation, I think it's just broken down the barriers for for clinicians that may not like technology, but just were forced onto technology to be able to service their customers. They probably realised it wasn't as bad as they originally thought. We've used eHealth and it's been really, really effective, easy to use, and I think because of that, there's breaking down those barriers. There's going to be a lot more opportunity in eHealth because it'll be a lot easier to create those markets.
Excellent. There've been a couple of other questions which we can address offline, but I want to thank Dr. Don Perugini for joining us from Australia today, and Bartosz Pieslak from Warsaw. As is standard, at the end of every webinar, we're happy to take questions. So if I haven't answered your questions today, or if Bartosz or Don haven't covered something that you really want to know, please send us an email at webinars. It's on the screen, webinar@itcraftapps.com, and address them either to myself or to Bartosz or to Don, and I'll get those to the relevant people, and we'll get answers. I've had a comment there. Does itCraft take ideas from concept to product? Of course, it's the business we're in. Every project at itCraft starts with a workshop. We want to understand business models. We want to know how this can scale up to be a scalable, profitable, viable business. So that's what we're involved in, and as I mentioned, itCraft is one of Europe's leading mobile and web-based app developers. So if anyone's got any questions for either Bartosz or to Don, then we welcome those. And once again, thank you very much for joining us today and taking the time. It's been a fantastic webinar, and we look forward to hearing from you. And as Bartosz mentioned, we've been working on an ebook. The itCraft team have put together an ebook on telemedicine, which will be available in the coming days. So all people who have joined us today will be in contact. And also a cameo appearance from Dr. Don Perugini in an interview for that ebook. Fantastic reading. So thank you very much for everyone, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thanks, Bartosz. Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Gareth.
Take care. Stay healthy.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.